Face Forward Media. This is Healthcare Musings. I'm your host, Dr. Hashem Hasabala. Welcome, everybody, to Healthcare Musings. So happy to have you with me. I'm honored and delighted to have Mr. Reinier Schuur. He is a health policy analyst for the Center for Modern Health, which is a health policy think tank dedicated to empowering people to live healthy, thriving modern lives through freedom and free markets. He has a podcast called The Pursuit of Health, and I subscribe to his Substack, and I wanted to have him on because he has a lot of very intriguing thoughts about the health care market and the current policy landscape that I wanted to get better kind of understanding from him directly. So, Mr. Reinier Schuur, so happy to have you. Welcome to Healthcare Musings.
Thank you for having me.
So let's get. So I really wanted to talk about your thoughts about health insurance, which is very, very intriguing and thought-provoking. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that your feelings that the current health insurance paradigm is wrong and flipped over head, and it should be changed. Kind of allow me to kind of understand that further and unpack what you think.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good place to start with. We think of insurance in other industries as covering things that are high cost and unpredictable, like a house fire or a car crash, but that's not how health insurance work. It covers pretty routine things, and there's always people arguing like, oh, it should be covering more things. But then the insurer has to actually make the numbers work, right? So they'll start putting up all these kinds of barriers like co-insurance and co-pays and high deductibles. And then it just makes it untenable, really. And so, again, it's easy to blame the health insurer, but try to understand it from their perspective, right? Like, even if they were completely nonprofit, so the profit motive is out of it, they still have to make those kinds of decisions. And I think people should really start to question whether or not it's a good thing to have most things covered by their health insurance, and maybe whether certain things that are routine and low cost should be taken out.
That's very interesting. The issue is most of the things are very costly. And so because your feeling is this, it should be like traditional insurance where it covers catastrophes, like hospitalizations, emergencies, accidents and stuff, but the routine stuff should be covered by the individual. The problem is the routine stuff is super expensive. Now, I'm a physician and I don't begrudge the charge that I charge, the charge that I charge the patient, though I know that because my employer has negotiated with the various payers, I can charge $1 million. I'm not going to get paid that. I'm just going to get paid whatever I've negotiated with the payer. And if I go strict cash, like the other day, I visited an emergency room while I was working, actually, and the bill I got was $24,000. I'm very blessed. I earn a very good living as a physician. There's no way I could afford that without health insurance. It was super expensive, and now my copay was still a lot. But it was a fraction of what the bill was. So, and I'm, thank God, of comfortable means. Most people would be bankrupt. My daughter who passed away 17 years ago with cancer, I would have been bankrupt by 1 week in the hospital for all the things all the costs that were incurred if I had to pay that out of pocket. So how do we square that circle?
Well, I mean, you're definitely right to point out that most routine care is very high cost these days. But I think that's very much a feature precisely of having things covered by insurance. And so you kind of have this like chicken and egg problem. Like in order to get the costs down, some things do need to be taken out of insurance. But if you're going to be the first person to do that and no one else really does it, then you're stuck with a high bill. But then there will definitely be things like cancer, right, and chemotherapy. That's something that's actually insurable, right? Like you can have proper actuarial work done in order to fit that into an insurance plan. Like that makes sense. Cancer drugs are very expensive. Like that's something where it makes sense to have insurance cover it. But I mean, like if you look at things like the direct primary care model, people are able to afford a direct primary care monthly prescription for $50, $100 um, um, a month, and I pay more for my monthly phone bill for that. So you're definitely right that the idea of moving things out of insurance willy-nilly and all of a sudden, yeah, that would leave people stranded. But I would still encourage people to think of how we could do this slowly over time, because the fact that insurance is covering so many things, it doesn't change the fact that the underlying costs are still so high, and someone has to pay for that somewhere down the line.
Right, right. And for example, it costs. I'm in the hospital space. We partner with hospitals to provide critical care services and other inpatient services. It's very expensive to run a hospital. I had Ken Kaufman on the podcast a while ago, and he outlines it. It's super expensive. It's a 24/7 business. Most other businesses are not 24/7 businesses. They have to keep their doors open. They're a large employer for communities. It's a big deal when a hospital closes. So the hospital, just the business itself, is super expensive to run. And it's not sustainable on government insurance, and it has to provide insurance. So, I mean, how would, like how, I mean, that's why I wanted to talk to you about it, because it's just a fundamental rethink of how everything would work. How would that work? I understand direct primary care. And not every primary care physician can be direct primary care. And the ones that I see in my area do not charge $100 a month.
Right.
And they charge $10,000 a year, if not more, right?
Right.
So most people are not going to be able to afford that. So how would that work?
Well, I mean, I would definitely encourage you not to let the current features of the system we have constrain our thinking, because then we're stuck. Then there's like, okay, well, things cost too much. We can't move forward. We just need to, I don't know, do what? Have single payer? Well, I mean, that doesn't really seem to work in other countries. Right? Like I'm from the Netherlands. We've got single payer. It's got lots of problems, right? And I've lived in other countries like the United Kingdom. What I would really encourage your audience to consider is, what would it look like if we actually had more of a free market? Like, and I'm not even talking about like a complete free market, right? Like, I'm just talking about, what if we had government programs that played their role and left an actual market free to operate, which is currently not the case. There's all sorts of ways in which government programs and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services bleed into the private sector, and in some cases even more so than in other countries, right? So, for example, there are prohibitions on doctors being able to see a Medicaid patient privately, right? You don't have that in the NHS in the UK, right? A doctor in the public system can see a patient privately, but in many state laws, it either explicitly prohibits that, or it's sufficiently vague to deter it. And then what you get is people, well, they leave the Medicaid program because it doesn't reimburse well enough, and then people don't have access to doctors. And I would just encourage people to think, well, what would it actually look like where we have these public programs, but we actually have like a small but growing market where people are free to innovate with different financial models, right? Like it's not like fee for service, cash pay is the only model, right? People can come up with different models. The bottom line is that your health is valuable to you, and there must be a way that we can create different models to make that work for not just the patient, but the people providing the service. I just flatly reject this idea that well, healthcare is just inherently expensive. Well, we haven't really allowed the freedom to innovate with different ways of financing healthcare.
Well, that's very interesting. Just you had mentioned earlier that the public health programs in the Netherlands or the UK have problems. Can you help me understand and the audience understand what kind of those problems are? Because there's a lot of politicians who are arguing for Medicare for all and a single payer system, and they think it to be simple. And as let me tell you, Medicare, the reimbursement's not good. Hospitals cannot survive on Medicare alone, and very small administrative costs. Payments are quickly. The regulations are weird and sometimes difficult and don't make sense. And still, patients like it for the most part. They it is and it's very efficient and it pays relatively quickly, although albeit not enough. So what are the problems with with single payer systems in Europe? Because those are the systems that are always pointed to as an example of what works.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about that is that um, people in European countries that have some kind of single payer system, universal healthcare, when they think about contrasting that with the American system, they think, oh, well, I'm happy that we have what we have. But then when they're actually talking about the system that they have on their own terms, they complain a lot, right? And
Hmm.
I mean, just talking about the Netherlands specifically, there's all sorts of kind of cultural tropes that, first of all, good luck getting an appointment with your PCP. Once you do see him, like for pretty much everything, the solution is like, well, just have some tea and have some ibuprofen. Right, that's like that literally is a cultural trope, and that like unless you're like dying, it's like, well, here's like take some ibuprofen and tea, and it's the same kind of tropes that you have in Germany. And I think what in order to make those systems work, you have to take away choice, right? That's the only way that those systems work. So, for example, in the Dutch healthcare system, um, everything is gate kept by your primary care physician, who you have to be registered to, right? It's illegal not to be registered to a PCP, and they have to be within something like 15 minutes of where you live. So uh, if you move somewhere else, even though the Netherlands is very small, you can like take a train between where you work and where you live. Uh, you're supposed to change your doctor if you move too, even though you might like your doctor. And so, and they basically have to approve any kind of referrals to specialists, and they don't get to do that on their own. They follow a government kind of guidebook, and if you don't meet the right threshold, well, then you're out of luck, you know. And I mean, people in America like the ability of being able to go to any doctor that they want, especially if they have good health insurance. Well, yeah, you wouldn't have that if you had a single payer system. It just necessitates taking away your choice. And then I think the real question is not necessarily what will it cost in terms of money, but h- how much is your freedom worth? You know, it's and for me, it's worth a lot. So, yes, these systems are incredibly expensive from a monetary perspective, but I think from a deeper sense, it's the moral cost that is the real cost.
I see. But do you think people were saying, well, okay, you have the freedom, but I'll never be bankrupt. There's no potential for me to be bankrupted by a hospitalization in the Netherlands or the UK or France or anywhere else. Even though when I was in Paris, somebody fell. We were dining, somebody fell, hit his head, and the ambulance, I think it took an hour. It's 45 minutes to an hour to come. And I was just shocked, right? But at the same time, it was free. Like there's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, there's zero chance you can be bankrupt financially from a hospitalization that you didn't cause or is not your fault. Here, you can be you get critically ill and you spend a week or two in the ICU or longer, you're talking about literally millions of dollars.
Oh, absolutely.
Isn't the trade is the so do the is the trade off the loss of freedom worth the impossibility of being bankrupt from something that you didn't choose to happen to you?
Well, I mean, so your question kind of presumes that the bankruptcy is like a feature of freedom, and I think part of the reason why high medical bills and bankruptcy is a big issue in American healthcare is precisely because there is not enough freedom, right? It's a feature of all these weird things like in and out of network exclusions, which insurers come up with because they have no other way to negotiate the price down with doctors, because insurance is the main way that most of healthcare is being paid for, right? And so
Right.
I think, I mean, you don't see this level of concerns about high bills and bankruptcies in other markets, right? Because it's it's pretty bad to bankrupt your customers, right? And I think it's more of a feature of the fact that we don't have a functioning market that you have those kinds of things. Where, I mean, what kind of uh, industry like you can't even know the price of things going in, right? Like if you go to the hospital, you ask what something is, like, oh, you'll have to talk to the billing department. Maybe that's the problem, right? Like maybe that's why you end up with surprise bills and things like that. And yeah, that is a problem. But I don't think the solution to that is like, oh, well, then like we have to have single payer. I think that just limits our uh, possibilities.
I see. And but if you look at other insurance markets, for example, there's a lot of home insurers that are pulling out of Florida, for example. They just said they made a business decision. It just costs too much to insure homes in Florida. We're going to pull out. And now people are left scrambling, right? Or, for example, in our house, we had damage in the roof and their insurance replaced my roof. Now, when I went to renew the insurance, they just raised the deductible to such a degree that I have to, if I wanted to change the roof again, I'd have to pay the entire cost out of my pocket, right? Isn't if we really do have a catastrophic insurance plan or system like that, aren't it's different. Insuring a home is not like insuring someone's health and well-being, right? Or protecting them against catastrophic illness. Um, aren't we subjecting ourselves to the risk of that kind of problem where the insurance, we can go back to the old days where I lived in those days where you could be kicked off your insurance. When my daughter was getting chemotherapy, I literally had to log in every hour, every week and a half to make sure that they didn't kick me off. And there were lifetime limits to how much that they will pay before they'll stop paying. I mean, that was a very unpleasant environment. You're worried enough about your child having cancer and getting chemotherapy and dying. And my daughter unfortunately passed away. Um, Now you have that added stress that I think one of the, for all the flaws of the Affordable Care Act, it got rid of that stress of worrying that you'll be kicked off your insurance or the horrific, pre-existing conditions where if I had a gap of literally 10 minutes between my old insurance and my new insurance, my daughter wouldn't be covered. I mean, that I don't know that isn't the traditional insurance market, it doesn't it lend to that kind of practices because the insurance company needs to make a profit.
Well, I mean, I think one reason why health insurance has these kinds of problems is precisely because it can't function as proper insurance, right? Like, if the expectation is that they cover routine care, I think they become less good of a product to covering the things that should actually be insurable, right? Like that's why they have to like set up all these Byzantine systems of co-payments and co-insurance and prior authorization. You would have a whole less of that if they could focus on the truly devastating care, like your daughter's cancer treatment, right? And obviously, being able to stay on a plan would be like a feature of that product, right? Like because you want to have an insurance plan where you're not kicked off. Well, they
Right.
could write that into the actual plan, but it that just doesn't make sense now. I feel like insurers have to constantly fight an impossible battle of, on the one hand, offering care, and on the other hand, like keeping down premiums, right? Like and don't get me wrong, like there's a lot to dislike about the current system, but um, I think that is actually an argument for why more care should be happening on a non-insured market than an insured market.
I see. I see. So if you could wave a magic wand and change the system, you see, what would your ideal system be? I think I've read some of this, but for the benefit of the audience, and I'll definitely link your Substack, your Substack, and then the Center for Modern Health on the in the show notes. So if you could design the system from scratch, how do you think it would work?
So, I mean, on the insurance issue, and you do really need people to like want to buy into this, like in the same way that you have people calling out for, well, I want to get this more and more covered by insurance. Like we need like a movement of people saying, I want this out of insurance because I want to have more control with my provider to decide care and like more options, right? And so it's de-insuring things like routine, low cost care and prescription drugs. But more fundamentally, it's about unwinding and decoupling the public programs and the kind of way that the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid have influences on the private market. We need to separate that, right? So
Hmm.
we need to have an actual private market, which in many ways we don't have. Like, there's all sorts of ways in which people in the private sector, patients and providers, are encumbered by rules set for public programs. And so my vision would be to create a parallel private market next to the uh, public programs. Now, what that looks like in terms of details, there's many different options on how to do that, but that's like the grand vision, which I think we should strive for.
I see. And we haven't even talked about prescription drugs. I mean,
Right.
the whole, I mean, there's no, I wanted to get rifaximin for my son. My insurance denied it because I had to do all these things.
Hmm.
And then, so I just went on and just, the retail price was ridiculously expensive. And I got it for, again, a fraction of the cost on GoodRx. I don't know how
Right.
GoodRx does it, but but that's just an antibiotic. So what if you're
Right.
talking about oral chemotherapy or even new antibiotics or brand new drugs? There again, because here in the United States, there's no negotiating from a large perspective. The drug companies can charge whatever they want, and it's exorbitant. Again, people are not going to be able to afford if I go to the pharmacy and get it. So how would that where would that come where would that come from? Where would the resources be to get even if it's not a generic medication, even generic without insurance is so really expensive.
Well, I mean, again, it's we don't know what it would look like, right? Precisely because insurance does cover so many things, and
Hmm.
I would highly encourage people to listen to an interview I did with health economist Tina Marsh Dalton called "Disentangling Drug Prices," where she makes that argument as well that her mother is on insulin, and it's ridiculous how expensive insulin is, given that it's like there's no patent on insulin itself, right? It's more than 100 years old at
Right.
point. But it's because of all these weird things, and definitely in insurance covering it makes it more expensive, right? If it wasn't covered by insurance, you'd have many more incentives to get the price down. But because it is covered by insurance, well, you can charge whatever you want for it. And then there's things like making it easier to get biologics approved through the FDA, right? But biologics are weird things, and getting FDA approval is very expensive, and so that's why there are only, I think, like three main producers um, of insulin in the U.S. And so, like, I think if you would just uh, address those things, those bottlenecks, then yeah, you can make things more affordable. But something like a price cap, which they're discussing doing now, extending the Inflation Reduction Act cap on insulin for $35 to commercial insurers as well. Well, yeah, like we know how price controls work. They lead to shortages and they lead to other problems, and so it's not a real solution.
I see. Yeah, yeah, that's just very interesting. And I think you've advocated for expanding what can be used in a health savings account. Talk to me about that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's all sorts of ways in which health saving accounts are this promising vehicle to empower patients to be uh, consumers and of their own healthcare. But if you have all these rules that all you need to have this kind of plan that fits with it, and even if you lifted those restrictions, it's not a panacea if the providers don't act like sellers, right? So simply having a health saving account does not automatically put a downward pressure on prices if providers are not used to putting up their prices. And so I think what you would need for that is to do precisely what I've talked about. You need to work towards de-insurance, right? Which is a long-term plan. I don't have all the policy steps for that in front of me right now, but long-term, that's what you would want to do. And so having simply expanded health saving accounts, or for example, price transparency laws alone can actually do that.
That's very interesting. It is very definitely food for thought. But I think the way we start to change, because obviously the system right now is not working, right? And
Yeah.
there's we always keep saying there's not enough money in healthcare. There's not enough money in healthcare. Do you actually believe that? And from your perspective as a policy analyst, do you believe that there's not enough money in healthcare?
No, I mean, I'm not a health economist, but what is it? 18% of GDP is dedicated to healthcare in the US. I I think it has much more to do with the system that we have than the amount. And you also see this in other countries where they claim that, oh well, we don't have enough money, but if you have inefficiencies, if people aren't rewarded for coming up with more affordable care, well then yeah, there's never enough money.
Right. Right. So it's a matter of changing the incentives. It's very interesting. That's why I wanted to have you on. We're almost out of time, and I'll get you back to talk about physician-owned hospitals because I read your latest Substack. I'm looking at the quote now um about doctors not being business people, which we're not. We're not taught to be business people, and you're bemoaning this fact. So definitely got to give you back to it so we can focus on that and talk about that because I've been in private practice, and now we have a different kind of private practice, and we are not business people, and we get manipulated all the time by unscrupulous business people. So it'd be great to get you back to talk about that in detail.
Yeah, so I mean, there's this Section 6001 of the Affordable Care Act, which prohibits new physician-owned hospitals from being created or from expanding if they receive Medicare or Medicaid dollars, which practically speaking is an effective ban because Medicare and Medicaid is such a big part of the market. And the reason why I wrote an article about it is because it's kind of strange why this ban exists, right? Because the reason the ban was ostensibly put in place was because there was concerns that physician-owned hospitals would engage in things like cherry picking, where they would only get the healthiest patients. They would um, close down unprofitable services and only focus on lucrative services, and they would self-referral. But those are all things that corporate-owned hospitals could incentivize their own physicians to do, right? So if the behavior is really the problem, well, then why not go after the behavior? And I I have this hypothesis that the reason why they targeted physician-owned hospitals in particular is because they're bigger than an independent practice, right? Like people have a generally romantic view of doctors as small-time business people, but when it comes to anything big, we're automatically suspicious. And
Yeah.
maybe sometimes we should be suspicious, right? Like if they engage in questionable behavior. But being big in definitely a free market just means that you're successful. It means that you're able to offer value to people. And so I would definitely, I think that's why they were targeted, right? Like it's not for the behavior, it's that people are suspicious of physicians as business people. And I, and you mentioned that like, oh, we're not business people. We get manipulated by business people all of the time. I I think it's helpful to consider when free markets started coming up in the 19th century up until today, right? And it's not even completely free, but to the extent that we have markets, there have always been concerns about con men and unethical business people, right?
Yeah.
But that's something that we worked through, right? And most importantly, people that are unscrupulous in a market where value creation is rewarded, they can't last that long, right? They can only last long if they can manipulate the rules in their favor, which is in some cases is what we do have, right? But if we actually put them out into a market where they have to offer us value or perish, well, then that punishes the unscrupulous business physician and rewards the one that is actually offering something that we want and we need.
That's very important. Yeah, so that's very interesting. So I want to delve into that next time in great detail. So, Mr. Ray Schuur, it's been an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks so much for your thought-provoking thoughts about the current healthcare market and how we can possibly change it for the better. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening. Sign up at healthcaremusings.com to get every episode delivered directly to your email. And please don't forget to leave a 5-star review. Thank you so much.